Okay, how about this microphone? Yeah, I know. I saw there was nothing coming through. Is that better? You can hear me, right? I'm not just a face making expressions and stuff. Although now I can't hear the music. I see it playing, but I can't hear it now. That sucks. I guess I don't need the head. Oh, it like really relaxes me to listen to music. I really want that. Damn. What am I gonna do? So sad. No music. I guess I don't need headphones then. It's just like so awkward just talking to my computer, you know? Okay, so I guess I don't need the headphones at all. So I'll just take those off. Alright, so first of all, how are you doing on this wonderful May 1st, 2020? Doing fine. That sounds fine. And oh, anyone else? How are you doing? All right, just thinking about my grade. That's good, I think. I think that's good. It's about that point in the semester when people start thinking about grades a lot more. Almost the last day of school. So we have 1 week until next week is the last day of class for classes, and then the final exam period begins. Grade aside from time management. Time management is always a struggle. You get better at it with time, hopefully. But for those of you who swim by fast, yeah, it's weird. There's like all these like things going around on the internet about how March lasted like 3 years and then April lasted like 5 seconds. Just for, I don't know if you all know this, but May 1st is actually like May Day. So May Day is the original day in which we recognize labor. So it's like Labor Day, but before Labor Day was Labor Day, there was May Day, in which we recognize that people organizing their labor could get concessions from bosses, from management. So thanks to things like unions, we have like the 5-day work week, the 40-hour work week. We have weekends. If you just think to like the Industrial Revolution, people just worked every single day of the week, like 14 hours a day. And so luckily, thanks to people organizing their labor, we have a much better deal now where we have things like overtime and protections for that. It's not the best situation, obviously, but all the concessions that management has made to make work better because people demanded it. So if you don't know, there is a strike happening today at, let's see, Instacart, Amazon, Whole Foods, Target, Trader Joe's. So please do not buy anything from those places. Do not order anything from Amazon or go to those stores in solidarity with those workers who are striking, to send a message to the company that those people need to be provided with masks, with protective gear, and safeguarding their health, because a lot of people are going to be sick in Amazon warehouses, especially in Staten Island. So please don't buy anything from these places today to send a message that you care about workers and that they matter. Okay, so now we're going to have some new material. So we are going to talk about interfaces today, interface design. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up. Let me just move this over here. And I hope I am coherent today, because I've had like a pretty bad headache all day and my neck has been hurting this week a lot. So I have like my monitor setup is a little weird, so I can't actually see all of my screen. So I hope that I'm not like missing anything. So interface design, and I have the chat over here. So how many of you have heard of interfaces? The word interface. I'm sure you're familiar with it, right? Cool. Yeah, so people have heard of basic interfaces. We have here some buttons on a PlayStation controller as an example. And so interfaces are everywhere, and interfaces are definitely with games. So if you pick up a controller, you're using an interface. If you look at a menu in a game, you're looking at an interface. And so interface design is a very important part of games. So there are physical interfaces and digital interfaces. So we're going to talk about a little bit of both today. So it probably won't take the full, it almost certainly will not take the full time. So I had you all play some games on Pick-a-Pick. So Pick-a-Pick is, and how many of you were able to play something? So it's like a collection of handheld electronic games. So originally like the Game & Watch series from Nintendo is probably the most popular one. So it's okay if you didn't get to, but I hope to give you a little bit of time to be able to do that. So if you try to do it and it didn't work, you have to make sure that you enable Flash. So if you're in Chrome, there's like, you have to click the little top thing. It'll ask you if you want to run Flash, because by default it's blocked. So in the future, web browsers are going to like remove Flash. So unfortunately, this website will stop working soon, and a few others that are very useful. But for now, it still works. So I will just, let's see, go over here. So we have, if you didn't see it, this is the website. So it's a very cool site. It's very well designed. So you have a bunch of different games down here. You can click on a game and it will tell you a little bit about like when the game is released. It'll tell you what the game's called, stuff like that. And then you can actually hit play. It pops up basically like an emulator where you have the controls are mapped to different keys. And you can actually play the game. And it also has the sound as well. Not all the games have sound. So I can actually play, and it actually shows what the like the button presses, it simulates it. So you have like something that's, you can really get a feel for the way that the game originally felt. So I don't know how old you all are, but how many of you have ever played a game like this or seen one of these kind of like handheld electronic games? I know that usually there are like a few people in a class that have had them, but I imagine that this, like over time, fewer and fewer people will have. So some people have seen them. So I actually, if I look through here, I actually owned one of these, if I can find it. So I owned this one, and I guess the music, the sound for the game is not important, because I have to remember that the audio is playing because I can't hear it for whatever reason. You had like general emulators, or you had like emulators for this kind of stuff? Is that Kingdom Hearts 3? So I actually owned this Terminator one. I don't know why. It was probably like a random gift from someone. I wasn't allowed to watch Terminator, so I don't know why I was allowed to have some kind of game like this. It was probably a hand-me-down from someone else. So on here, if you haven't played these games, Candyman. So you're like basically like, you have this kind of fixed background in these games, and you have little highlighted areas on the LCD screens. So they're fixed, so it can only draw like certain images on the screen in certain positions. They're not really animated. It's just like, you know, a new frame to like demonstrate where something is popping up. And so I'm just like moving my position to like kill these people. And so yep, it had a thing where if you got high scores in a group of this type of game, you started the game with extra stuff. That's cool that they had like a reference to this stuff in Kingdom Hearts 3. So I think if you played many of these games, I think at least in my memory of playing them as a child, they're for the most part, they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. They're painful to play. They're not fun. You don't know what's going on half the time. And so I think it's a really interesting thing to have them up here, because you can actually play them in a way that seems good. Seems close to like how it would be to physically play it. And also you can the design of this website's really good, so it is really well designed. It's easy to go through here. It has a lot of information. It's very intuitive to use, which is not the case with most of these games. So did anyone play any games that were like kind of difficult on here? Because there are a whole bunch of different ones, and they're all like, this one has like radio game launch. I don't even know if it has dials and stuff. They all have different controls, so you can't really know. And some of these are like Russian clone games from the Soviet Union. And so someone said that they played Bartman. So Bartman from The Simpsons. So this is, if I play this, this I think is a very good example of a really, really terrible game. So when you look at this interface, which is like, you literally look at this face with the buttons, the face of the console, you have, you have this graphic on here, and you have some buttons. And the first thing you do is look on the left. You see this, what you would imagine is like a directional pad, has like some weird things about it. So like I don't know. Did whoever played this, was it Naji? Did you know what was going on? Did it make sense to you? So for one thing, it's not very responsive. So like when I press buttons, I don't know what's going on. There's no feedback for the player. You can kind of see what's going on, but there's also like some background information. So like the characters overlap with the background, so you have a lot of noise. It's hard to filter out like visually what's going on. You see that there are clearly like some rocks coming at Bart. And if you notice on that D-pad, you have the left and right buttons actually do left and right, but what you would imagine the up and the down ones do, one is throw and one is grab. So those seem like totally arbitrary, like it doesn't really make sense, especially if you played anything with the directional pad. You would not expect that to be like that. The lag is crazy. Can you ask the question again? The question was just like, did you notice anything about like the playability of this game? So are other people noticing a lag in it? I feel like Twitch is having some issues today. You see the lag in the game. Yeah, that D-pad is awful because it's not actually truly like a regular D-pad, so they might have done this to save costs or something. And you also have like on the right, you have like start/jump, which this is not so uncommon. So some of these games have like things where one button does many different things, which you have to be careful if you're designing a game like that, because it quickly gets very confusing for players. So like I said, most of these are terrible, difficult to play, painful, you don't get enough feedback, there's lag and stuff. There are a few ones that are better. I think that Coffee House, I think that one's pretty decent, if you're looking to check one out. So it's nice though that someone like has enough nostalgia to go back and make this website. Okay, so let's see. Let me just bring this back up. And so we just kind of talked about it together as far as like what the things were on there. And so we're going to be moving on from that and start talking about game feel. Has anyone heard of the term game feel? it's okay if you haven't. It's not widely known among game players, but it is a term thrown around in game design. So we can think of game feel as the experiential sensation of a game, what it's like to play or control a game. Way much. Okay, so you have. And so this originally came from Steve Swink's book, Game Feel. And so he wrote an entire book on like what it's like to feel or experience a game. So if you're interested in it, there's a link in the slides. I'll try to post them later if anyone wants me to. And in the book, he talks about 5 common game feel experiences. So the first one is the aesthetic sensation of control. Like, what does it feel like to play a game and control something in a game? The second thing is the pleasure of learning, practicing, and mastering a skill. So, you know, if you try doing something new, it's like hard at first. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So, for instance, if you're faced with like a new controller, at first it might be kind of alien because you're not used to it, but eventually you get better, and it feels good to get better. The third thing is an extension of the senses, and we'll talk more about that one in a little bit. Extension of identity, so you can think about it as like controlling an avatar. And the last one was interaction with a unique physical reality within the game, so it's sort of existing within the world of a game. And I have these on here for later if anyone's looking at it. And so when we think about interactivity, we think about a feedback loop. So a feedback loop is something in which one thing gives something to something else takes that, whatever it received, and spits it back out, and you have like a loop, right? So in this case, we have a computer, or a computer, as it's stylized here, that's displaying something on the screen. So you might be familiar with it. It's showing the game Asteroids. So in that game, it's conveying information to the player via the screen. So you can see that information, and good, you can see my cursor, that information is going from the screen to the player. The player is then processing it, deciding what to do, and then transferring that what they want to do into actions via the controls. Then they're pressing buttons or whatever to control whatever they want to do. It sends it to the computer gets that information and does something as a result. So there's this two-way exchange between the system, between the game and the person, so it's a system. So we do the same thing when we're like interacting with people. So for instance, like a conversation. So here you can see Bill and Bob are talking. So Bob says like a bunch of stuff, right? And you can even think of it like what we're doing right now. So Bob says something, Bill hears the things that Bob says. Bill thinks about what is being said by Bob. And then once Bill thinks of that, then he sends back like a response and just more information. And so like we're in a conversation, it's constantly a back and forth as far as like, you know, I ask you a question, you respond in the chat. I read the chat, and then I respond to your whatever you say in the chat. And so that's what interactivity is. So you can think about the conversations we have with the human and the computer. It's a lot, you know, you could break it down more specifically. So we looked at the very simplified one. So this is a little bit more drawn out as far as like the communication that's happening between the various parties, between the person, between the computer. So for instance, we get feedback when we play a game in terms of like, you hear audio from the game that tells you, for instance, if you go through a menu, it might play a sound that indicates that you've like confirmed an option or something. And you listen to that, you know what it means, and then you know what to move on with. And so the speaking is actually like communicating what you want to do via the controller. So the computer is listening to the controls, and then based on what you've done, the input you've given, it updates the screen. I just said like a lot of words. Does that make sense? So we're just talking about the system of interaction with the game. And if this particular graphic, and these are all from the book Game Feel, then just think about this one. think about like how the computer is taking input from the player, which means something within the game, and then the game spits back an image which means something to the player. The player processes it and decides what to do based on what they see. So there's like a two-way loop here. I get it, it's a common loop that is similar to games in us. So, you know, you're a player, right? You play a game and it's a two-way conversation. If it was a one-way conversation, if you were just talking to the game and the game had no visuals, no audio, no feedback at all, then it probably wouldn't be very fun. So another thing is like if you have no feedback as a player, it's very frustrating. So feedback is super important. So if, for instance, you're at like a crosswalk, and this is like less common in New York, but in other places, if you're at a crosswalk or there's an elevator button, maybe you press it and no light comes on, there's no feedback, whatever. Do you trust that button, that it's working? Because you kind of expect there to be a light coming on, right? When it doesn't come on, you just like press it like a million times. You press the elevator button to go up, 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 because you don't know if it's going to stop on the floor you're on or what. So this kind of feedback loop is really important for game feel. And so if we think about interfaces, we're talking not only about the controller in terms of like something you hold or press buttons or keys or mouse or whatever, but also the visual feedback that the player is given. So in this case, we have, maybe recognize this as Street Fighter. You have like, what is this? Ryu or Ken maybe, and Chun-Li there doing signature moves. And so if you break down what this game is mechanically, you know, if you ignore what it looks like, then you actually just have these kind of hitboxes. So I don't know if people are familiar with hitboxes. So these are fighting games. So if one box enters another box and one person is like, you know, for instance, if the box with the fist enters the box of the face of the other person, then that person takes damage to their health. Actually, can you all hear me okay? Because I forgot that I switched the mic because the mic wasn't working on the headphone. Not used to seeing casual professor help. What's wrong? Too casual? Should we be more formal? So, because I don't know what it sounds like, because I test all the audio stuff before, and then it fucks up. So I'll just leave this here. Let me know if the audio is bad, because, you know. Okay, cool. So mechanically, it's different than what the game is communicating. So the game is communicating things with animations, with visuals, and those things immerse you within the game. You could play the game if it was just boxes, but it's probably not as fun. You're not as engaged. And so this is sort of, you can think about the extension of senses that we talked about and the extension of identity, where you take on the player. You feel like, you know, if you ever played a game and like, you know, you're getting hit or something and then you like kind of feel it almost, you're really immersed in the game, and that's part of game feel. And so if you think about like the way that different things are represented, the way they feel, you can think about like if you were to be a dog, which some of you are dogs, I assume. Maybe that's an unsafe assumption. It's almost certainly an unsafe assumption. But there are dogs in the world, right? There are also cats. So some dogs ride horses, and the feeling of being a dog riding a horse is kind of a weird feeling, right? Like if you're to control the horse as a dog, you have paws, so like you can't really like pull on the reins at all. And then if you're a dog riding a bicycle, it's a little bit different, right? You can put your paws up on the handlebars. You also have to pedal the paddles, and so these are things that are like in the physical world. So if we were to represent these in a game, then we would have to think about like what is an appropriate way to represent this? What is a way that properly represents the experience of doing this thing? You can also imagine like if you were to operate a tank, it would have like, I don't know what a tank's like inside. I assume it's like hot, but you have to like, you have all kinds of levers and stuff and all kinds of like controls and things. And so if you were to represent what that experience is like, you'd have to take that into account. And so that might also be different than the experience of riding a roller coaster. So I don't know if anyone has seen, and let's see, I hope the music is still playing. I'm gonna go ahead and mute or stopped at the music for a second. I hope I'll remember to start it up again. Has anyone seen this video? So I will play it for you right now.
Yo, I ain't gonna front, it's some scary shit, nigga. It's some scary shit. It's some scary shit. It's some scary shit, nigga. It's some scary shit. It's some scary shit.
So this is DMX on a roller coaster.
What? Get it.
Very excited about this.
What? Yo, it's scary. It is scary, though. It is scary. Ooh. Hurry up! Why change my mind?
I feel like he loses consciousness at that point. A little bit.
Cheeks up. Yo, cheeks up, man. We got a stone cold ice face. We had an ice grill like we wasn't scared. I need a six-pack. Camera right here. Camera right here. It ain't nothing. So it's all live. All the screaming. All the yelling.
So you can imagine the feel of that experience from DMX's perspective. You know, a very serious artist. So the feel of that is the experience of that. If you wanted to represent the game, you'd have to take into consideration that feeling of acceleration, the feeling of restraint with the harness, things like that. So I hope people are able to hear the audio, because I just all I can do is look at a meter. I'm restarting the music, so I hope that's okay. So if we think about like physical interfaces over time, which are traditionally how we interact with the game, how we give our feedback to the game. So we have some controllers here. So anyone familiar with any of these controllers? So what's let's see, what's this one on the bottom, in the middle, the bottom middle? So at the top left we have the Super Nintendo controller. This is the original NES. This is PlayStation 2. This is the Nintendo Wiimote, the N64 controller, GameCube, Xbox 360, and an Atari joystick. So like you can see that the paradigms of interaction have changed over time. So you got it, that's right. So for the Atari one, you know, it's a joystick, so you have like something that will simulate movement is usually what it's used for. And I think there's like one button. It's often on the top. So and you know, which one you prefer is you know, it's subjective. But what you can do with a controller that allows you with just a joystick and one button is very different than what you can do with, for instance, the Xbox 360 controller. So in that one you have like two analog sticks in which to, I know, I'm sorry, the graphic did not have the Dreamcast controller. I'm very fond of it myself. I mean, the N64 controller was a really weird one actually, because of like it has multiple ways that you can handle it. And it was the first major controller to introduce the analog stick, which is sort of like a mini joystick. And so different control interfaces allow you to do different things and are better at certain things than others. So if we think about like and these things, so when I say that they're subjective, I mean that like it's like the way you experience it at one time is even different than the way you experience it later. So it does kind of look a little bit like a spork. So for the Nintendo 64 game GoldenEye, and you may have played this one, or you may have played a re-release of it or something. So if you played the original one on the N64, if you played it anytime recently, then you might realize that when you play it, and it's a first-person shooter, so you are moving around in 3D space from a first-person perspective, and you are shooting people, and so the N64 controller only has the one analog stick, and it has these C buttons, which are supposed to be for camera movement, but it doesn't really work super well. And so if you go back and try to play this, it's very difficult to play because the control paradigms that we've gotten used to have changed over time. So now our expectations of control for games are much higher than they used to be. So Oddjob is in fact cheating. It's not fair. No one's allowed to play Oddjob in multiplayer, it's true. Especially if you play with like keyboard and mouse, a first-person shooter, then you're used to being able to free-look. So in this case, you just move forward and you do left and right will rotate your entire character. So if you ever play this in the original format, it's very, very hard to play if you're used to games now. So you can imagine how that compares to, and this is Metal Gear Solid 5, a modern shooter game, and if it's on a console, then it probably involves two different analog sticks. One is for movement and one is separately for looking. You have a much more fluid interaction, and it's much easier to control. So you have, now I'm just watching GoldenEye. So you could also imagine, this is a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, an MMO, I can't speak. So there's a lot of stuff going on screen, so just imagine that you're trying to play an MMO, which involves usually like a keyboard with lots of key commands. People often have like fancy mice with like 12,000 buttons to do macro things and all this stuff. So imagine just playing that with like a Joy-Con, like one half of a Joy-Con. And like, do you think that that's going to offer the same experience as playing this in the way that it was intended, playing it with keyboard and mouse, with like lots of different options on the keys? Like you have this, you have way more buttons than you do on that Joy-Con. Although it could be worse, right? It could certainly be worse. So it could be playing a modern game using an Atari paddle. So in this one you have like a rotating knob and you have a button, and that's it. So like you rotate the knob to move something. So this was used for like Pong. So you have like one directional movement. It's basically like left or right. You can't move any other way, up or down. So just imagine playing a modern 3D game with only like this ability to move like left or right and only one button. So we think about like different controllers being invisible or visible. So if you go back and play GoldenEye, it's going to be very visible. Like you're going to know that you're playing a game through a weird controller. If you're playing something that you're really into, like you're not thinking about it, you've been like, playing this game for like 12 hours today or something, you are not thinking about the controller at all. Like you're just interacting without thinking about it. It's autopilot, automatic. And so that's usually what we want in games. We want it to be an invisible control where people don't even think about it, they just do it. Which, if you had to do it this way, and I mean, you could potentially create a control scheme for something really simple, control something really advanced, but just think back to those games on Pick-a-Pick. The ones that have like duplicated controls where this button does 3 different things are, not ideal. So also when you're playing games, and this goes back a little bit to what I was saying before about like playing the fighting game, if you've ever driven a car and been in a car accident, let's say that someone hits you on the road, you get hit, and you say, that person hit me. You don't say that their car hit my car. Because in that moment you're driving a car, you're like embodying the car. You feel like you are the car. The same thing if you're like on a bike, or if you're in a golf cart, or whatever. If you're in a go-kart, it becomes something that like when it's intuitive, when you're not thinking about it, you actually are that thing. That's what you feel like. You feel like you are the avatar that you control in the game. As long as you're immersed in the game, then you feel like you are that thing. And so this was all about game feel. And so are there any questions about what we talked about so far? So, and this slide goes also back to the extension of the senses and the extension of identity. So let me know if you have any questions or any comments or anything really. So if we're just going to move on, we're thinking about in terms of like people's roles in terms of designing this. Okay, cool. Thank you for the feedback. Awesome. Good to hear. We talk about interaction design. We talk about user experience design. And so these are often used interchangeably. So has anyone ever heard of UX or even IXD? So Mummy Twab said, for reference, is me drawing can be an example to where I am the pen and don't think on it? Sure. So that'll be an example. So the pen is your interface with the paper. So that's like how you're doing it. So if you're not used to drawing, it's probably very hard. But if you're like, skilled artist, then it's very easy. So this is a position where people are actually thinking about like what it's like to be a player or a user interacting with something, and then designing that experience to make sure that it is a fluid and easy to use experience. Similar to this, which you may have heard of, user interface design. User interface is usually abbreviated with UI. User experience is usually abbreviated with UX. So user interface design usually refers to digital interfaces. So if you're on a computer, you have like on a website or something, you might have buttons. You might have an application for a mobile thing where someone is designing the layout of the buttons, how they work, what the buttons do, things like that. So this is, and you'll often see jobs like this combined where someone is a user experience and user interface designer. So usually when you see this, you'll see a combination of UX, UI, so user experience and user interface design. So has anyone heard of UX, UI? Because it was something that no one had heard of like 5 to 10 years ago, like it didn't even exist, and now it's like everywhere. So, and these are jobs in software, in websites, in games, and all kinds of things. So a lot of this is kind of generalized to tech, and it applies to games as well. So what makes for a good user experience, user interface? And that is anticipating user needs. So if you know what the player needs or what the user needs, and you anticipate that, then you can create a response to that need before the person even realizes it. So if we think about like technology and the uses of technology in the past, which one of these was considered more revolutionary? We have on the left the Palm Pilot, which you may have never even heard of it. And on the right, we have an iPhone. Both of them have touch screens, in which you are able to interact with the machine through touch. However, the Palm Pilot was like mildly popular around like 1997, maybe 1998. Oh, look, there's a calendar on there. 1996 is the date on there. So we think about the iPhone as revolutionary, not just because of the technology, but what it did for the user. Thinking about how it anticipated the way people would use the device. So the design of the interface and the user experience was significantly better. So the usability of it was much better than the Palm Pilot. And so the Palm Pilot went away, even though it may have been a very, one of the first things to like successfully use a touch interface, which made it really cool at the time. It didn't really pick up steam versus the iPhone, which was taking technology that had already existed, but applying it in a very good way. And so it's all about thinking about what the technology can do and using what it's good at to do as much as you can, the best you can with that thing. Because you could just as easily design a touch interface device that is terrible. I'm sure if you import something like some kind of phone ripoff from like Wish.com, it's like a Sam Snug or something, then it's probably going to have a terrible interface and not going to be very usable. And so when we think about interface design, you might think that the best interface is no interface. And this is not a quote from anyone, I just made it up. So when I say no interface, what do you think I mean by that? No interface. You have to go make sure the audio, the music's still playing for you all. You can be relaxed, even though I'm not relaxed. Nothing on the screen. But you don't see anything? What does that mean, nothing on the screen? I'm scared. You're scaring me. Is that... no interface. Nothing on the screen. Okay, that's your answer, right? See, it's been intuitive. Okay, so... nothing on the screen, that could be like close to... Okay, cool. Okay, I didn't know if it was a response to the question or not. Can you put the music down a bit? Absolutely. So again, I have no idea how loud the music is because I can't hear it myself. Is that better? Kildred, something so intuitive that there's no thought on the interface. So I think the fact that it's intuitive and the fact that there's you're not thinking about it, I think that's exactly right. That's what I meant. So you want an interface that is invisible, something that people are not going to think about, that's not going to come up, that anticipates their needs. And so I don't know if has anyone played this game? It's called QWOP. It's from Bennett Foddy from 2008. It is one of my favorite games of all time. So if you haven't played this, in this game, you have, and Bennett Foddy also made the recent game Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, which is like you're like in a cauldron and you have like a stick and you're like using the mouse to like jump up this like hill thing. It's hard. It's hard and weird. I recommend it. Mummy Twab said, up a tiny more please. Also sorry, here you're not chill. Saw it, never played, and heard of Getting Over It. I know of it, it's so hard. Up a little tiny more, the music, you mean? It's just like, okay, let's see. Is that better? Can you hear it? Okay, awesome. So for QWOP, you have, you're basically like participating in a track and field event as a runner. And so you have 4 different keys to play the game. You have Q and W, which control your left and right thigh. So like Q is your left thigh, W is your right thigh, and then you have O is your left calf, and P is your right calf. And so you have to think about the muscles that you're using when you're playing the game. So like if you think about running, like when we run, you don't think about it at all, you just run. I mean, probably. Most people anyways. But in QWOP, you have to like consciously think about like which muscles to use at what time. So you have to think about like if you're running, like which muscles would be like tightened and which ones would be relaxed and when. So the fact that you have to think about this means it's like impossibly hard. So it's super hard to be successful in this game because the interface, the way that you control the character is not intuitive at all. It does not make sense for the way that we run. Never seen this game played well. I mean, there are ways you can be successful at this game. So if you haven't checked it out, it's on foddy.net, so check it out. It's hard. And so we think about like the different ways that interfaces evolve. And when I say no interface, you know, we might be thinking about moving toward this direction in which all we have to do is think about something and it does it on the computer. So this is a brain-computer interface device, OpenBCI, from someone I went to grad school with. So thinking about like, you know, the best interface would be just something that just like reads our minds and does what we do, you know, like where we like totally embody the avatar. So if we think about like some kind of like science fiction virtual reality kind of thing, you know, you just like put on the headset and then you're like actually in the character, in the world, you know, you're doing this and whatnot. And so all of this is about moving away from manual labor. So thinking about things we have to do manually, we're moving in a direction where things are automated, things read our minds. All of this, we're telepathic, we're telekinetic. You know, I can communicate with you remotely. You're not physically here, but I'm communicating with you. It would be harder if I was like physically around each one of you and I had to explain this like 1,200 times. Maybe not 1,200, there are not that many people in this class. Maybe 12,000 times, which is a few more. And so we think about the evolution of people over time. You know, we evolved to use tools. Those tools are physical, and then we have things automated. You know, everything's like robots and computers now. So like you can, you know, press a few keys on your on the web, and suddenly like your meal appears. You didn't have to cook it. You didn't have to do anything. So psychic powers. Yeah, so that's the direction we're going, where we're like trying to think about all of our needs are met in ways that we don't have to think about them, and we don't have to do the work associated with them. So if you play QWOP, it's a lot of work just to be able to run forward something that we think should be easy. And so the game works so well because it's a subversion of that. And so when you're designing user interfaces, it's important to think about the needs of a user or a player. So let's all be lazy together. So, I mean, you know, and I say this in my programming classes, a good programmer is a lazy programmer. You know, you're thinking about like the best way to do something. Direct brain control of things has a lot of complex moral and ethical implications. It's sick, but then you get BTLs, and if you can get info out, you can probably put info in. BTLs, is that a reference to something? BTL, it sounds familiar. So, so let's take a look at a few like really bad user experiences. So just for example, and you've probably all experienced this, where you have to change your password. So just imagine you have to, and it gets more and more strict every time. It's moving away from a human interface. So yes, so you have to get the bacon, tomato, and lettuce. I mean, that makes, you know, maybe the tomatoes have gone bad or something. You have some E. coli. But if you have to update your password and it must be 18,770 characters, can't repeat any of your previous ones, it becomes like Shadowrun. Yes, thank you, Shadowrun. Shadowrun Dragon something? That one's good. That one's really good. Dragonfall. That's my favorite one for the digital ones. So, and I'm sure you've all experienced this thing with the password, where like it's like, you know, you put in the password and it's like incorrect password, or your password just used or whatever. And so if we look at, so a few years ago, maybe like 4 years ago, I think, there was actually, I don't know if you heard about this in the news. So in the state of Hawaii, there was actually an emergency alert. This is a real alert that came out for Hawaiian residents, that there was a ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter, and that it's not a drill. So what they were doing is they were actually testing the ballistic missile threat warning system, just in case there was a missile attack from North Korea. And so they actually accidentally sent out, instead of sending out doing the test warning, they actually sent out the real signal. So everyone like started running for shelter, hiding in places. So I have a friend in Hawaii, and like he like was walking down the street and went into like what is it called, a retirement home, and like went to the basement and hung out like under desks and stuff with a bunch of older people for like, you know, half an hour or something, until they realized the follow-up was that, sorry, that was actually supposed to be a drill. It was not supposed to be sent out to everyone. So this actually became a meme after this happened, because people were trying to imagine like what the interface was like that actually had people send out the real thing instead of like doing a test run. And so I'll just share a few of those with you. So we have a missile warning system. So this is an imagining of it. So you can see the send test warning, and you see like the pop-up comes up and it pushes the button down. And I'm sure like this has probably happened to everyone, right? Where you're like, I want to click this, and then you click an ad and you're like, oh fuck, I didn't want to click this ad, god damn it, like because the things pop in. So that's an example of like, you know, a poor user experience. So here is another potential imagining of what it's like. So you have missile alert and alert test. But nope, you selected missile alert because the design of the interface makes it look like it's missile alert, but actually it's missile alert and alert test. So you wanted to do the alert test rather than the missile alert. Let's play that one more time. So I think there might be a whole subreddit dedicated to this. I think that's where I found it. So here's another imaginary example of just like a terrible user interface. So choosing a time based on like time zones around the world. So you're like shooting an arrow. So like thinking of like the worst possible interface, like what would be the most difficult way to do this? So we can also take a look here. Another example of putting in a password. So put in your correct password. And so like actually having to put all the characters back, you know, in their places, like that would be awful. So you could imagine on your computer increasing or decreasing the volume, like in the taskbar or something. What if instead of a slider, it worked like a bicycle pump, right? Like, wouldn't that be great? It slowly like loses pressure and stuff. So that would be a terrible interface. It's not what we want. Some more examples. So security questions when you're creating an account or something. What is your favorite color? Just imagine that you have to pick the exact shade using one of those color pickers. Like, wouldn't that be awful? Or like the security question, what is your password? Which doesn't really help you with the problem. Or what is the current date and time? So that's not something you can replicate. What did you have for breakfast? So obviously that's going to be different every day. So how are you guys supposed to remember what you picked? This one's good. What security question did you choose? Which, you know, the answer could be what security question did you choose? And it could go down like that. So these are examples of people like showing you what a bad interface would be. So if you've ever been in like an old car, you have these like ways of rolling up or down the windows where you had to like physically like rotate this thing around to like go up or down, which was awful. I got pulled over by a cop one time and I was trying to roll the window. I was really scared. I was like 16 years old. I was really scared. And then the knob actually broke off of my door. So my window did not roll down. And I was like terrified as the cop like walked up that like, you know, I was doing something wrong or something. And so, you know, these are examples of how not to do it because these are making it painful. They're making it the interface is very visible. You have to think about how the interface works to be able to make the interaction that you want happen. And so if we think about like some of the ways that interaction designers and UX UI designers think through these problems, just a few examples. One way that they handle this design, and nobody told me that this window was inside of here. Now I feel awful. One way is that they create personas. Personas are just like basically ideas of like someone who might use a system. So in this case, they like thought of someone who might use whatever system. So they call this person Nerdy Nina. It's not a real person. It's just an imaginary person. So they can like, so to help them imagine what that person's experience is like when they try to play it, what are that person's values or experiences? Like for instance, how tech savvy are they? What are their interests? Things like that. So we call those personas. And then if they are thinking about like those personas and how they interact with a device or a menu or whatever, any kind of interface, then they do what's called user scenarios. They talk it through. What would this person actually do? They might do lots of user testing. And so another thing that they might use are paper prototypes. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard of paper prototypes or done paper prototypes. Hopefully you've done something with paper. And so why would we want to prototype something like a game or like a user interface? Why would we want to prototype it with paper instead of just like making it in code, for instance? So I mean, the reason is it takes a lot, and if you've taken a programming class, you know this. It takes a lot of work to develop things digitally, when really you're just trying to think through the design of it. So easy to change and test, so absolutely right. So when you're doing things digitally, everything is hard if you want to change it, because everything takes a lot of work to develop it. So when people build paper prototypes, they have to get creative with how they represent these things. So they might like draw out the menus. In this case, you have like a fake iPhone, and the person just like slides this card to be the menu, so you can like show someone else explain it and think about like what the next menu would be to pull it out. So you're simulating that experience of interacting with that. And these can get really complicated where people have like simulations for the buttons and things, the different menus, all that stuff. Here is a pretty cool example of someone's paper prototype for an email system, I think. And so they're like showcasing the way that the interface works with the various buttons and stuff. You can see the way they folded the paper to try to show that this is an expanding menu. So if you were to try to like prototype this design digitally, it would take forever. But if you draw it, you can draw it and iterate upon this design many times, over the course of a few hours with just pen and paper. And so that's one of the reasons why we use paper prototypes. It means it's not a heavy investment, and you can change it and iterate upon it very quickly. And so just for the record, for anyone keeping track, there are some good resources for user experience and user interface design. Goodui.org is a really good website for this. UXPen is a website that has lots of free books about user experience design. And also A/B testing is another concept if you want to look it up, where people test two different kinds of proposed interfaces or websites or something, and then they test how people interact with them and how well they do or how they respond to it. So at this point in the physical class, we would have actually had an exercise. That exercise I'm actually going to make as an extra credit, or not an extra credit assignment. It'll be another optional assignment so that you can make up for that up to 10 assignments. So remember, you have the final project is the video showcasing the 10 things. So you have an optional assignment to be able to get those in. So in that you would make, using paper, pen, scissors, whatever you have, to design a Game & Watch, like the handheld style game interface for the card game Blackjack. But you only get 3 buttons, so you have to think about what those buttons do. What are their purposes? Do they do multiple things? What are the important things that people have to interact with in that game? To make the interaction as natural and intuitive as possible, and anticipating the player's needs for that game of Blackjack. And Blackjack is, if you don't know how it's played, it's a very easy game to understand, so the rules are very simple. So there's a question: how to get in contact with you to see if you need any help to help the grade get better. So I have office hours on Monday and Wednesday. So next week I have, and I posted this in, I think I posted it in the online, so if not, I will repost it. So there's a spreadsheet and you can make an appointment. You just put in your name in the spreadsheet, and then we can meet and talk about whatever you want to talk about. So it could be about your grade, or it could be about like, if you want to transfer into a 4-year program, or it could be about like, whatever, the classes you want to take next semester. Does that make sense? And so as far as like interface stuff is concerned, let me see. Let me move this back. Okay, awesome. That's it. All we're talking about with interfaces today. So originally this was supposed to be 2 different weeks of stuff with some activities, but we just compressed it down to just the 1 week. So we had it where next week is the final week of classes, and we didn't need to use the final exam week because we had the makeup week. so that Marcelo did, which was like week 9 or 10 or something. So those of you that are on here right now, we don't have anything scheduled for the final exam week, but that doesn't mean we can't actually schedule that for the final class if you want more time to work on both the assignments for the class, anything you missed throughout the semester, and for the final video, the showcase of your portfolio of work from the semester. So for those of you that are present, do you think that you would benefit from having that extra week to do more work? So hard with everything changing and everything being changed. I know it's like it's pretty hard for everyone to adjust right now, and so you know, any way that I can help you, I want to help you. So I want to give you all the option if you want, which we're deciding right now, like how if you want the extra week, is that going to be helpful? Because sometimes extra time is not helpful for most people. Actually, I think procrastinating, like, it just means that you start the work around the same amount of time, but you just put it off for more time. But that could help you with your other classes. I don't know. It's your situation. So we have, let's see, 4 people would like more time. So it makes sense. Do we have anyone who does not want more time? Which, you know, it could be the case where you want to just get it over with. You don't have many things to make up or whatever. Okay, so it sounds like everyone wants more time, which is, you know, I anticipated that. So for instead of having our final class next time, why don't we have next time will be I might have like a question and answer session or something in place of that final class, and then everyone will need to submit the final project and any missing assignments by the final exam period time, which, let me look at the calendar. I believe it's just 1 week later. So I don't know how the final exam week is working this semester, because it's obviously like a very weird semester and no one's meeting in person. So let's say that for next week, we'll not have any regular class. I'll be available for anyone who wants to talk or wants to ask questions or talk about the class or whatever you want. And then we'll actually have the final, we'll have like everyone get together, a debrief on the class, how we went throughout the semester. We might watch a few of people's videos for the final project. And so that will be May 15th. So that will be the final exam period. And so next week, you know, use that time within that we would normally have class to either ask me questions or work on the missing work or the final project. New rags for my body, not much toilet paper left. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope that you get toilet paper. I mean, I'm willing to Venmo you $1 if you need $1 for toilet paper. Professor, this final video, is it long? So I think I specified on River. If I didn't, I'll just say like 5 minutes. So you have 5 minutes in which to talk about each one of the 10 assignments that you're most proud of throughout the semester. So cost 5 now here in the Sand Kingdom. I don't know. Well, I'll donate 1. Maybe you can get like a few, like a part of a roll. I don't know. So we don't want to make videos that are too long because people won't want to watch them. And it's nice to make videos because you have to think about what you're going to say in advance. So if people had like live presentations, they have a tendency to, like, you know, people don't like, so they're like nervous and they start like rambling or not, you know, forgetting what they're going to say or whatever. So with the video, it's an opportunity to make something where you actually like consciously think about what it is. You can write a script or something. And again, you can use like whatever technologies you want to make this video. You don't have to be like seen in the video. You don't even have to be heard in the video. So it doesn't have to be like this Twitch kind of situation where you can see me, hear me, and I'm showing you something. But you will have to show the work, and you will have to explain the work. So you could explain it, like we said last week, you could explain it through like a text-to-speech application. So on River, I linked to like an example of one of those things. So you could use something like that. I also linked to an example from a different class where someone did a video presentation. So if you didn't see the class from last time, you can click on the hyperlink as well. So you all will have an extra week to catch up on whatever you're missing, to watch the classes that you missed if you missed any, submit work, and yeah, hopefully be in a good situation by the end, because I want everyone to walk out of this class feeling like they've learned what they needed to, and I know it's hard, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to be successful. So I want everyone to be successful. It's not about like who gets an A and who gets an F. It's about like whether you get what you need to out of this class, and we're setting the bar like to make sure that everyone can meet that. So are there any questions before we wrap up for today? Any other questions, I mean, besides the toilet paper? Was that a question? No, that was a statement. Gosh, I get so thirsty when I'm like talking to my computer. I'm like almost out of water. I think you all want to take what I've seen here and use it for my future in life. So yeah, I hope that you can use stuff from this class in your future classes. So if you think back to the first class of the semester, we had this was a new class, right? This class had not existed before this semester, so this is the first time it's run, and unfortunately it's been like a weird semester because of the pandemic. But everything used to be squeezed into different classes, and people weren't really getting what they needed to. So the idea was to put everything that people need into this one class so that people can then be successful in whatever they're working on. So you have like sort of a sampler, like taste testing, pixel art and 3D, like some animation stuff. We're talking about interface design today. So everyone has like a preview of those different things, has like some baseline knowledge that they can then move on and advance with. So yeah, last opportunity for questions today. And then we have, you'll be able to ask questions next week because we won't have regular class. And then we will we'll watch some of the videos. All of your stuff will be due on the 15th. Anything else before we wrap up? So I don't think there are any more questions, so I hope that everyone has a good evening. Yeah, question, okay. What's your question? By the way, who is Mummy Twab? I don't remember. Sorry, Mummy 2B? Mummy 2B? Future Mummy? So I'll hang out for Mummy 2B's question. So if anyone else has any questions, you're welcome to jump into the chat and ask questions. For the rest of you who don't have questions, thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of today's lesson. You'll have the optional assignment if you want to, and I will see you, if not next week, the following week. So good night. Okay, so it's Jamie. How would you take catching up, go easy first? How would you take catching up, go easy first? The names just wanted to use this for private. Catching up, go easy first. I'm not sure Sure, no problem. I'm not sure what you mean by how would you take catching up go easy first? Like, are you talking about like if you're missing assignments, like the order in which to make them up, or? Yeah, no problem. Right. So, I mean, honestly, I would just take it based on the order that the class was presented in. So, if you're missing stuff from like the beginning of the semester, I would handle that stuff first, and then move on later. There are certain things though that are sequence-based. So, if you missed, for instance, like the first and second pixel art assignments, I would take the first one and then the second one because the second one builds upon the first one. Also, with the 3D stuff, if you missed those, I would do the first 3D assignment first and then move on to the following ones in the order that they're presented. So when you go on River and you go under topics, you'll see the list might be in a weird order. So just look at the week name. So you'll see like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and you can go through them that way to pick up whatever you're missing. Does that make sense? And answer your question? Cool. Okay, well, sorry trying to give this to you fast to get you to answer my question before leaving. Understood, thanks. Yeah, no problem, you know, I'm here to help. So I will be on River if anyone has any other questions, but have a great night. Goodbye.